October 16, 2023. Forest pitch. Corruption and communalism may trump livelihood issues in Chhattisgarh. In Chhattisgarh, the ruling Congress has built an election plank with a mix of regional pride and welfarism. The Bharatiya Janata Party, its principal opponent, is targeting the government on corruption and non-fulfillment of election promises made 5 years ago. The Congress's attempts to build a narrative around Chhattisgarhi subnationalism have made regional identity a key electoral theme for the first time since the state was formed in 2000. The party is also relying on its direct benefit transfer schemes such as the Rajiv Gandhi Kisan Nyaya Yojana or the Godan Nyaya Yojana, or higher prices on minor forest produce that cover a major chunk of the rural and tribal populace. Rural housing is another issue that has been hotly contested, with both sides accusing the other of being ineffective and insensitive in this regard. A government survey that has pegged the share of other backward classes, OBC, in the state's population at 43.5% forms the backdrop to the Congress's special focus on the social group. The BJP has fielded OBC representatives in nearly 2/3 of the general seats. In the 90-strong assembly, 10 seats are reserved for scheduled castes and 29 for scheduled tribes. 9 of 13 candidates announced by the Congress for general seats are from OBCs. Both parties exhibit their commitment towards OBCs, and tribes people who form nearly 1/3 of the population seem to get less attention. The BJP has accused the government of large-scale corruption. The Enforcement Directorate is conducting a multitude of probes that entangle bureaucrats and other individuals linked to the government or the Congress party, including Chief Minister Bhupesh Bagel's close aides. The Congress dismisses these allegations and accuses the centre of running a witch hunt against it. By fielding the father of a young man who died in communal riots and another riot accused against the lone Muslim face of the Bagel cabinet, the BJP has indicated that it is aiming at polarization. The party is facing disenchantment among its workers who complain that too many old faces have been fielded again. The Congress, in its first list of 30, has dropped 8 sitting members of the Legislative Assembly and can expect some rebellion in the ranks too. Both parties claim credit for the reduction in violence in the insurgency-hit Bastar region, but a new political entrant, the Hamar Raj Party, is hoping to harness tribal discontent against both. A rejuvenated Aam Aadmi Party, AAP, the declining Janta Congress Chhattisgarh founded by the late Ajit Jogi, and the Bahujan Samaj Party are also in the fray, but the contest will likely remain between the Congress and the BJP. Thank you. Olympian Heights. India must be wary of the complexities of hosting the Olympiad. From time immemorial, the Olympics has been used as a soft power medium. Governments worldwide have bet on the sporting, economic, and socio-cultural impact the Games can leave, as well as on the political legitimacy the hosting of the event can bring. Post-World War Europe, post-apartheid South Africa and Brazil of the 2010s are vivid examples. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement at the International Olympic Committee, IOC, session in Mumbai that India would leave no stone unturned in its efforts to organize the 2036 edition of the quadrennial extravaganza is to be seen in this light. That India has also expressed an interest in the Youth Olympics as a precursor is a clear signal that it wants to shed the reticence that came with the unsavory happenings at the scam-ridden and ineptly handled 2010 Delhi Commonwealth Games. Though the ratification of the host city for 2036 will take time, Brisbane was selected for the 2032 edition only in July 2021 and there will be other claimants. The move lays bare India's global ambitions. Be it through the desire for a permanent membership at the United Nations Security Council or the euphoria surrounding the G20 presidency, India has consistently sought a seat at the high table. The tag of an Olympic host can give it a vantage position in a shifting world order. Sporting-wise, it is clear that India wants to benefit from the strong tailwind produced by the stellar 107-medal show at the recently concluded Asian Games. Ever since Abhinav Bindra won the nation's first ever individual Olympic gold at Beijing 2008, there has been a steady uptick in performances at multidisciplinary competitions. There is even a firm belief that India will win double-digit medals at Paris 2024. While such confidence is not entirely misplaced, conducting a mega event such as the Olympics presents a humongous challenge. Costs are often prohibitive, as seen from the fierce public outcry during both Rio 2016 and Tokyo 2020. In the case of Tokyo, the financial burden was said to have ballooned to $15.4 billion, more than double the initial estimate. Recently, the Australian state of Victoria pulled out of hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games because of mounting expenditure, and the Canadian province of Alberta withdrew a bid for the 2030 edition. To avoid being seen as a populist ephemera in a deeply unequal society, the IOC has moved away from the one-size-fits-all solution and now asks potential organizers to present projects that best fit their economic, social, and environmental realities. India's success will depend on how it marries its aspirations with the inherent complexities. Thank you. The Israel-Hamas conflict and Nusaybah's analysis. Chinmayi R. Garakan is former permanent representative of India to the United Nations. Sooner or later, experts and military observers will busy themselves with analyzing and holding forth on who won this ongoing war between the State of Israel and Hamas. The verdicts will not be unanimous and will be largely guided by the personal and national biases of the experts. But there will be no, and nor should there be any, difference of opinion about who lost. A total failure of intelligence. Hamas's lightning, brutal and simultaneous attack on several locations in Israel on Saturday, October 7, 2023, stunned Israel and the international community. The question of how Israel was caught unawares about this operation underlines the fact that it was a total failure of intelligence on the part of Israel as well as the United States. Understandably, the authorities here are reluctant to talk about this matter while the war is going on. Many fall guys will be found, no doubt, when the inquiries are completed and published. Prima facie, Hamas seems to have done better. The very fact that Israel had to declare war is a morale booster for Hamas. As for Hamas, it has openly declared war on Israel ever since its foundation. When this writer lived in Gaza from 1997 to 99, most people were convinced that Israel had something to do with Hamas's creation. That the mighty state of Israel, the strongest power in the region, had to officially, through a decision of its war cabinet, declare war is highly flattering to Hamas. In the past, the rocket shower ended the same day, with Israel achieving its declared objective by the end of the day. In the present conflict, Hamas managed to continue its rocket attacks for several days, inflicting extremely heavy, unprecedented casualties on Israel, resulting in many deaths, many more injured, and a massive dislocation of the population in the vicinity of Gaza. The world has witnessed unspeakable cruelty by Hamas on innocent men, women, and children in Israel, worthy of undiluted condemnation. But Hamas would be proud of its accomplishment. The fact that several Palestinian civilians have lost their lives does not seem to worry Hamas too much. They will be declared martyrs. Hamas has inflicted almost a body blow to the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, ruled by the Palestine Liberation Organization, more specifically by the Fatah Party. The position of the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has become untenable and he might have to resign. Hamas's following in the West Bank will increase manifold. Further, support for Hamas on the Arab street will also increase. Is it also not possible that there will be sneaking, unstated admiration, however grudging, among some Western countries for the way Hamas has carried out such a well-coordinated operation? In military terms, Israel will, of course, prevail. Reports suggest that Israel has modified its goal from containing Hamas to eliminating it. How it will go about achieving this objective remains to be seen. Will Israel mount a ground operation into Gaza? It would have to be a massive operation, consisting of thousands of troops and dozens of tanks. Casualties would be heavy on both sides. One can assume that Israel would not wish to physically reoccupy the Gaza Strip, since it would be a kind of death trap. Who lost in this war? The people on both sides. Innocent civilian citizens would pay heavily for the bloodthirstiness of leaders on both sides. This is not to say that one is suggesting equal blame on both. But it is undeniable that the price for the war will be paid by ordinary people. The government of India has thrown its full support behind Israel. No doubt it has done so, convinced of the brutality of the attack by Hamas, but also in the belief that this posture will not have the slightest negative fallout among the Arab countries. For a long time, the ruling establishments in West Asia and elsewhere have wanted to normalize relations with Israel, which can provide them with much-needed technology and investment opportunities. One should not forget that Kuwait had expelled nearly 1,000,000 Palestinians in the early 1990s because Arafat had sided with Saddam Hussein during the First Gulf War. Arab governments do not want to do anything with the Palestinian cause. But their citizens will oblige them to rethink their wish to normalize with Israel, including Saudi Arabia's ongoing dialogue with Israel about normalizing relations with Israel. Also, such categorical support for Israel will go down well in Washington. India for once is not sitting on the fence as it was in the Ukraine war. Sari Nusseibeh, an eminent Palestinian intellectual, activist, and a true Gandhian if there is one in the world, wrote an extraordinary book that was published in 2011, called What is a Palestinian State Worth? He argues that the state is for the people, not the other way around. The state's primary duty is to protect its citizens and to enable them to develop, prosper, enjoy family life, and move around freely within the country. However, the governing groups in the government, primarily interested in remaining in power, generate strong patriotic fervor to the extent of stimulating the people to sacrifice their life to save the country. But, and this is important, if the state knows that it will not and cannot achieve its objective, and still perseveres in its objective, it will be acting immorally and unethically according to Nusseibeh. What right does the state have to willfully sacrifice so many lives for a cause it knows is unattainable? It would be obligatory for the state to dilute its war objective and to seek compromise. Nusseibeh's analysis, in the case of the ongoing war, would suggest that both the Israeli government and Hamas know that they simply cannot achieve their respective goals. Hamas is conscious that the state of Israel can never be destroyed or pushed into the sea, as they say. Israel equally knows that the ideology behind Hamas cannot be eliminated, nor can Hamas as an entity. Thus, both sides are behaving immorally and unethically, pushing ordinary citizens into the jaws of death. The zeal for war has seeped so deep among the populace that it does not realize that it is being exploited by the state for the sake of its and country's glory. On the Kashmir issue, can Nusseibeh's logic be applied to the Kashmir problem? Successive governments in India and Pakistan have known that they cannot achieve their maximalist objectives, capturing Pakistan-occupied Kashmir on the Indian side, capturing the whole of Kashmir, or at least the valley, on the Pakistan side. Applying Nusseibeh's logic, persevering in these objectives, therefore, is immoral and unethical. Should not some compromise, perhaps along the lines of the 4-point formula worked out by both sides a few years ago, be revived and reconsidered seriously? Thank you. The world needs to stop taking water for granted. Takayuki Hagiwara is Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations representative. In India, Ulak Demirag is Country Director and Representative, International Fund for Agricultural Development. Elizabeth Four is Representative and Country Director, United Nations World Food Programme. In India, the theme for World Food Day, October 16, this year, Water is Life, Water is Food, calls for urgent action in managing water wisely. Availability or a lack of water has become even more critical with increasing climate extremes. Countries face severe challenges such as drought, floods, unseasonal rains and prolonged dry spells. With less than 7 years left to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, and the United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, the UN's food agencies lay stress on the need to adopt innovative and collaborative approaches for improved management, conservation, and availability of scarce water resources. Water availability affects every aspect of human life, especially food and nutrition security. For instance, about 60% of India's net sown area is rain-fed, contributing to 40% of the total food production. However, rain-fed agriculture depends directly on water availability, and rain and soil moisture variations can severely affect food and nutrition security. There is an urgent need to adapt to climate change by promoting technologies and practices that make rain-fed production more resilient and sustainable. Sustainable water management is critical to address the impending food and nutrition security threats. In turn, irrigated agriculture accounts for 72% of global freshwater withdrawals, sometimes with lasting damaging effects on the sustainability of significant ecosystems, such as seasonal rivers and deep aquifers. Water and crop production. Decades of poor water management, misuse, and pollution, and the climate crisis have degraded freshwater supplies and ecosystems, adding to the vulnerability of small-scale producers to climate shocks and land degradation in some of the world's most fragile ecosystems. About 40% of the planet's total land area is degraded, leaving farmers with less productive land. Small-scale farmers, who make up more than 80% of farmers globally, are especially affected as they often lack access to finance, technology and irrigation to maintain a level of production that can sustain their livelihoods. Extreme weather events and variability in water availability are severely affecting agricultural production, changing agroecological conditions and shifting growing seasons. Changes in rainfall and higher temperatures also affect crop productivity, reducing food availability. The Government of India has assessed the impact of climate change in 2050 and 2080 using climate projections and crop simulation models. Without adaptation measures, rain-fed rice yields in India are projected to reduce by 20% in 2050, and by 47% in 2080 scenarios, while irrigated rice yields are projected to decline by 3.5% in 2050 and 5% in 2080 scenarios. Wheat yields are projected to decrease by 19.3% in 2050 and 40% in 2080, while Kharif maize yields could decline by 18% and 23%. In every scenario, climate change without adequate adaptation measures reduces crop yields and lowers the nutritional quality of produce. The FAO, in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Himachal Pradesh, and Maharashtra, is piloting a crop forecasting framework and model incorporating climate, weather, soil characteristics, and market information to aid rain-fed farmers in making informed decisions contributing to food security. Irrigation can also be an effective measure to make agriculture more resilient, and in most cases, enable farmers to transform their livelihoods by growing, consuming and selling high-value crops such as nutritious fruits and vegetables. In this context, the WFP supports soil and water conservation, the building or fixing of irrigation canals, dams, ponds, and dikes, as well as flood barriers through food assistance in exchange for labor. In 2021 alone, 8.7 million people across 49 countries benefited directly from such support. Similarly, IFAD supports Indian states in leveraging the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act scheme. Through safeguards during design and planning and encouraging participatory institutional development, IFAD ensures that micro-irrigation infrastructure is environmentally and socially sustainable and financially viable. Climate change adaptation. The FAO also supports the sustainable transformation of agri-food systems and climate-smart agriculture practices to improve water use efficiency. It supported the Farmer Water School program in Uttar Pradesh, which helps smallholder farmers. At the same time, the Andhra Pradesh Farmer-Managed Groundwater Systems project reached out to 638 habitations in 7 drought-prone districts, that included a hydrological monitoring program. Similarly, IFAD has enshrined climate change adaptation in its core strategies. It set ambitious targets in terms of leveraging climate financing to mitigate climate change by addressing the adverse impacts of agriculture and helping farmers to adapt to the increasing volatility of weather conditions, by investing in the restoration and preservation of soil health, water resources, and merging modern technologies with indigenous knowledge systems to build productive and resilient production systems and value chains. IFAD supported projects in Maharashtra, Odisha, Uttarakhand, Nagaland, and Mizoram incorporate climate-resilient seed varieties and crops, including millets, and train farmers in climate-sensitive agricultural practices and soil management to cope with increased water stress. The WFP is collaborating with the government of Odisha to develop solutions for smallholder farmers, focusing on women. The goal is to enhance resilience through solar technologies, establish community-based climate advisory services to help manage climate impacts and promote a millet value chain that reduces water usage and improves nutrition. Steps needed. To achieve global food and nutrition security, political commitment is needed as much as concrete investment. The needed policies and investments must promote innovative and proven technologies that allow farmers to increase their productivity, adapt to climate change and become more resilient to shocks, environmentally and socially sustainable and financially viable irrigation and water management strategies, reduce their climate footprint of agricultural production, as well as biohazards and environmental pollution, bring sanitation and drinking water supplies closer to rural households, adopt efficient food and water recycling strategies and strengthen institutional arrangements and capacity for sustainable and equitable water regulations, management, access, and ownership. The UN's food agencies work closely with the Government of India and state governments on innovations such as solar for resilience, secure fishing, and the revival of millets for renewable energy promotion, food security and nutrition. Thank you. Closing the gender pay gap in the workforce. 1 of 2. Getty Images. When women were missing from the labor force, that was because they were home caring for children. When they were paid less than men, that was because they had lower education than men. Or so said the economic orthodoxy, including theories popularized by the 1992 Nobel Prize winner Gary Becker. A few feminist economists and sociologists protested, but their voices were drowned out until Claudia Goldin stood on the podium as the president of the American Economic Association in 2013-14 and argued that the answer to the solution of missing and underpaid women did not lie at home but rather, in the market. A name and a voice. When Betty Friedan wrote in 1963 about college-educated women who were frustrated stay-at-home mothers, she noted that their problem has no name. Claudia Goldin, the 2023 Economics Nobel Prize winner, has spent half a century giving a name and voice to their problems. She has chronicled the evolution of the American economy from agriculture to manufacturing to services and noted that as economic production moved from home to factories, women were excluded from market activities. It was not until offices, schools, and hospitals began to offer more jobs than factories that women found jobs. However, even when they entered the workforce in droves, overtook men in educational attainment, did not congregate in female jobs, and did not drop out from the labor force to have children, women continued to earn less than men. Professor Goldin argued that this disadvantage is due to their inability to take on jobs that involve all-consuming responsibilities. Parental responsibilities make it difficult for women to take on jobs requiring long hours and irregular work schedules. The private equity partner who saw the deal through and stayed for late-night dinners and meetings had the chance of getting a fat bonus and promotion. These demands are incompatible with raising children, and one partner of a couple often chooses to go on a slower and safer track, the track dubbed the mommy track, even at the cost of a high-profile career. While women need not be the ones choosing this slow track, gender ideologies often prompt couples to assign women to take over extra family duties while men remain free to concentrate on their careers. Professor Goldin blamed this inequality on greedy work that demands extraordinary efforts from workers rewarded with high salaries, big bonuses, stock options, and fast promotions. Rising income inequality leads couples to forego gender equity within the household and concentrate on increasing family income via specialization. Her solution to this dilemma is restructuring a workplace that does not rely on heroic efforts, has moderate work hours, and predictable schedules. In some ways, Professor Goldin's work dovetails with that of Juliet Schor, who argued in her book The Overworked American that it was far more beneficial to companies to hire 2 workers who worked long hours than 3 workers who worked regular hours since it reduced costs such as health insurance, office space, and personnel services. I suspect that Indian workers in Bengaluru struggling to keep up with Zoom calls at 9:30 p.m. to confer with their American counterparts arriving in the office at 9 a.m. while helping their children with their algebra homework will relate to this. Although women's employment rates in India remain low, secular changes suggest that there is no reason why this must continue. Building on Professor Goldin's observations, the growth of the service sector should offer jobs for women that are not offered by the manufacturing sector. Rising education should increase their employability, and declining fertility should free up women's time. But how can we take advantage of these fortuitous circumstances? Reshaping the environment. While increased male participation in household work and child care would help, we must also find ways of reshaping both the work and social environment so that they are conducive to developing a work-life balance for both men and women. This means having work structures that are respectful of workers' time and do not emphasize very long work hours. This makes both social and economic sense. Stanford economist John Pencavel has shown that longer working hours do not mean more productivity and, in some jobs, lead to increased mistakes and injuries. But if we need to rein in the greedy workplace, we also need to rein in a variety of institutions that demand more and more of our time. This includes schools that rely on parents to supervise homework and urban developments that place homes far from workplaces. Until we can create these supportive institutions, it will be hard to write the last chapter for the grand gender convergence in labor market outcomes that Claudia Golden advocates for so fiercely. Thank you. Another shock for industries. The sector is facing the burden of true-up charges and adjustment charges. V. Raghavendra. State of play. After enduring severe disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the industrial sector in Andhra Pradesh is going through another rough patch as power utilities have decided to impose true-up charges and various adjustment charges on consumers. As a consequence, their monthly bills have gone up steeply in the recent past. Energy-intensive industries are especially hit hard by fuel and power purchase cost adjustment charges, grid charges, and true-up charges. Several units have reportedly shut down their businesses due to the steep rise in the costs of production, the fall in demand, which is driven by the global recessionary trend, and now, rising power charges. In addition to the basic, minimum demand charges, consumers have been burdened with an increased electricity duty, ED. The per-unit cost of power for industrial consumers is around 7.60 Indian rupees per unit, which has gone up to 9 Indian rupees per unit with the addition of true-up charges, while ED has been raised from a mere 6 paise to 1 Indian rupee per unit. The unit cost is higher for those with captive power plants as they have to pay grid charges. The stated tariffs slightly vary depending on the sub-sector and their consumption patterns. The impact is more pronounced on textile manufacturing units, ferro-alloy manufacturers, auto ancillaries, pharmaceutical units, and casting and forgings companies. The micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, which account for a major chunk of the gross state domestic product, are also finding it difficult to cope with the high charges. The Andhra Pradesh Chambers of Commerce and Industry Federation recently submitted a memorandum to the Special Chief Secretary, Energy, of the government requesting him to reduce the minimum demand charges. They insisted that these charges were burdensome, particularly for the food processing industries. They asked for the proposed enhancement of ED charges to be postponed and said that industries should not be saddled with a host of adjustment charges. The MSMEs sought the intervention of the Secretary to the Government of India, Industry and Commerce. These charges could also deter prospective entrepreneurs who are looking to invest in the state. Andhra Pradesh, with its strategic location, long coastline, natural resources, and availability of land, has distinct advantages for industry, but the prevailing uncertainty has cast a shadow on the industrial climate. Besides, these high power charges are being imposed just when the government is striving hard to make the state investor-friendly by improving the business environment. The industries are also troubled by the delays in the reimbursement of the power cost, which had been announced as a fiscal incentive under the Andhra Pradesh Industrial Policy 2020-23. If industries are to survive and remain competitive, the government needs to keep the power tariffs under check. Only years of unchanged tariffs would lend stability to the industrial climate. Frequent hikes will likely have a cascading effect on profitability. The upcoming industrial corridors and the string of seaports are bound to augment the scope for flow of investments, but only if the power tariffs are kept under control. In March, the opening day of the two-day First Global Investors Summit organized by the state government attracted investments to the tune of 13 Indian rupees lakh crore, at Visakhapatnam. While this came as good news for Chief Minister Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy and Industries Minister Gudivada Amranath, most of those agreements remain on paper as companies need time to keep their word. Against this backdrop, the issue of high power bills must be sorted out as they directly affect corporate earnings. Also, the unprecedented revision of power purchase agreements by the present government has led to a legal battle which has flared up to such an extent that the centre has cautioned the government against the consequences of tinkering with power tariffs long after they were agreed upon. All this shows that the state's power sector is going through a difficult period. Power tariffs are an irritant for industries which are trying to steer clear of a plethora of problems that began with the pandemic. The task on hand is to meet the burgeoning demand for power while keeping the tariffs affordable so that industries can survive this critical phase. Thank you. Text and context. Israel, Hamas, and the laws of war. Bloody trail. medics transport injured Palestinians to the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza on October 15. AFP. What are the international laws when it comes to questions of war, civilian attacks, hostage-taking etc.? Is collective punishment for a crime conducted by specific persons legal? Is the warning given by Israel to Gaza residents to evacuate adequate? Prabhash Ranjan. Explainer. The stories so far. On October 7, Hamas, a Palestine-based terrorist group, launched an attack on Israel, killing hundreds of civilians and taking many hostage. Israel has retaliated with all its might, triggering a war in West Asia. What are the laws of war? There are two separate and independent international law questions related to wars. First, under what conditions or when can countries use force in their international relations? This is known as jus ad bellum, regulated by the United Nations, UN, Charter. Second, how is a war to be fought, that is, what military actions are permissible? This is known as jus in bello. Assuming a country is justified under the UN Charter to use force, it still must ensure that it satisfies jus in bello obligations. Justification to use force does not relieve a country of its obligations to use such force in accordance with international law. The how of using force or the law of war is known as International Humanitarian Law, IHL, which provides the rules that must be followed during an armed conflict. IHL is contained in customary international law, the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and the additional protocols of 1977. It regulates the conduct of the parties or groups engaged in an armed conflict. Its primary objective is to protect civilians and reduce the suffering a war unleashes. No matter how just the cause of fighting a war, warring parties must comply with IHL. Do the laws of war apply to the ongoing military conflict? Yes, because the military conflict between Israel and Hamas is an armed conflict. As was held by the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia in the Prosecutor vs. Duško Tadić case, an armed conflict in international law exists when there is a resort to armed force between states or protracted armed violence between governmental authorities and organized armed groups or between such groups within a state. International law classifies armed conflicts into two categories: international armed conflict, IAC, and non-international armed conflict, NIAC. According to Common Article 2 of the Geneva Conventions, IAC includes all cases of declared war or any other armed conflict between two or more countries. NIAC includes non-governmental forces, Hamas, involved in battle with governmental forces, Israel. Common Article 3 of the Geneva Convention applies to NIAC. Thus, Israel and Hamas are obliged to abide by IHL. What about civilian killings? The primary objective of IHL is that during an armed conflict, a distinction is always made between combatants and civilians. War parties can only attack combatants and military targets, not civilians and civilian objects. Indiscriminate attacks that fail to distinguish between combatants and civilians are forbidden and thus illegal. Accordingly, the killing of civilians by Hamas is illegal. Israel's illegal and belligerent occupation of the Palestinian territory since 1967 does not allow Hamas to kill, injure, abduct, or torture Israeli civilians or target civilian installations. Also, any military attack that causes disproportionate harm to civilians, when judged against the expected military benefit, is barred. Israel reportedly dropped 6,000 bombs on Gaza, causing widespread destruction and death. This is a disproportionate use of force. Hamas's horrific attack on Israel does not justify Israel inflicting disproportionate harm on the civilian population in Gaza. All this amounts to grave breaches of the 1949 Geneva Conventions and constitutes as war crimes. Is hostage-taking legal? Hamas has taken Israelis hostage. This is illegal. Hostage-taking is specifically recognized as a war crime by Article 8 of the Rome Statute, a treaty establishing the International Criminal Court. Article 1 of the International Convention Against the Taking of Hostages recognizes hostage-taking as a crime. What about the Gaza Strip blockade? Israel's plan to block the supplies of food, electricity, water, and fuel in the Gaza Strip, where close to 2 million people live, amounts to collective punishment retaliating against a group for the conduct of individuals said to belong to that group. This action will exacerbate the already harsh air and sea blockade of the Gaza Strip since 2007. Such an action violates a fundamental tenet of IHL that no person should be punished for actions they didn't commit. Punishing all Gaza Strip residents for Hamas's actions is illegal and a war crime. Additionally, under IHL, warring parties must give advance warning to civilians to evacuate before attacking, which should be effective. If civilians are not given adequate time to evacuate, the warning will be ineffective. Israel's warning to the residents of the Gaza Strip is not effective. Given the air and sea blockade, the civilians do not have a realistic possibility of moving to safe places. In any case, civilians who do not move out despite the warning must also be protected. Both sides need to respect their IHL obligations and an investigation should be launched into the war crimes committed. Prabhash Ranjan teaches at the Faculty of Legal Studies, South Asian University. Views are personal. Thank you. The UN-approved Kenya-led security mission to Haiti. What is the purpose of the multinational security mission? Why was there a delay in deployment? Sumita. The stories so far. Around a year after Haiti approached the United Nations seeking urgent help to combat deadly gang violence, the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, has approved international intervention in the form of a foreign security mission, led by Kenya, to restore security, protect critical infrastructure and control spiraling violence in the country. Haiti has experienced a surge in violence over the past year as armed groups took control of large parts of the country, including the capital Port-au-Prince. This has resulted in the killings of nearly 2,800 people, including 80 minors, between October 2022 and June 2023. Why is UN sending a mission to Haiti? Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry first sought international support to assist the national police in October last year after the country plunged into a crisis when a group of gangs called G9 and Family seized control of the entry of the main fuel port Verax in the capital, protesting the PM's decision to cut fuel subsidies. The blockade brought the country to a standstill and led to massive shortages. The lack of gas and diesel adversely affected transportation and forced several hospitals and other medical institutions that relied on fuel-powered generators to halt operations. A UNICEF report at the time claimed that the operations of 3/4 of the country's major hospitals were hit due to the blockade. To make matters worse, there was a shortage of bottled water in the backdrop of a new outbreak of cholera. As the crisis deepened and overwhelmed the short-staffed police force, Haitian leaders turned to the international community for help, seeking a specialized armed force to counter gangs and their sponsors. However, the US and the UN were hesitant to take the lead. The stalemate ended in July this year after Kenya proposed to head the multinational force, following which the resolution was forwarded to the UNSC. What do we know about the mission? Unlike the UN peacekeeping mission to Haiti that ended in 2017, the Multinational Security Mission, MSS, will not be operated by the UN. Kenya has volunteered to lead the force. Other countries like the Bahamas, Jamaica, and Antigua and Barbuda have also offered support. The resolution says that the force will provide operational support to the Haitian National Police, including building its capacity to counter gangs, improve security conditions in the country and secure ports, airports and critical intersections. Notably, the resolution adds that the forces will have the authority to make arrests in coordination with Haitian police. It also intends to create favorable conditions in the country to pave the way for elections. Polls have not taken place in Haiti since 2016. The strength of the force in Haiti has not been specified in the resolution, although discussions suggest that 2,000 personnel would be part of the mission. While the US has made it clear that it won't send its troops, it has pledged $100 million in logistical support like intelligence, communications, airlift operations, and medical aid. While the deployment date is yet to be announced, Kenyan Foreign Affairs Minister Alfred Mutua was quoted as saying by the Associated Press that the force could deploy within 2 to 3 months, or possibly early January. What led to the delay? Haiti's troubled past with foreign military interventions is being viewed as the primary reason for the delay in deployment. The last time a force was sent to stabilize Haiti was in 2004 when former Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide was overthrown in a rebellion. This was followed by a UN peacekeeping mission which went on from 2004 to 2017. The mission was marred by allegations during its deployment in the country. A sewage runoff from a peacekeeper camp was blamed for causing a cholera epidemic which saw more than 10,000 deaths. There were also serious allegations of sexual abuse against the UN peacekeepers. Since then, Haitians have been skeptical about the intervention of a foreign armed force. Moreover, countries were wary of lending support to PM Henry, who doesn't enjoy the popular support of Haitians. Thank you. Why French AI firm Mistral's language model divides the developer community. iStock photo. A week ago, Mistral released a large language model, LLM, positioned to compete against Meta's LLM, Llama 2. Mistral has positioned itself as a potentially important player in setting up Europe as a serious contender to build foundational AI models. Poulomi Chaturji. In June, a French startup Mistral AI raised a record €105 million, $113.5 million, in its seed funding round, just a month after its launch. At that point, the startup, founded by a former DeepMind and 2 Meta employees, did not have a working product. So, initial reactions to Mistral's funding was seen as a sign of VCs being overly generous for the fashionable generative AI segment. Turns out there was a little more to Mistral that helped convince Lightspeed venture partners, French billionaire Xavier Niel and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, to loosen their purse strings. Europe's LLM player. A week ago, Mistral released a 7.3 billion parameter language model positioned to compete against Meta's Llama 2, a 13 billion parameters large language model, LLM. The French firm has claimed first place for the most powerful LLM in the nifty size LLM space. A look at its pitch deck shows how Mistral has cleverly positioned itself as a potentially important player in setting up Europe as a serious contender to build foundational AI models and play a big role in this geopolitical issue. AI-based product building startups in the US are largely backed by dominant players like Google and Microsoft. Mistral called this a closed technology approach that made large firms more money but did not really create an open community. Unlike OpenAI's GPT models, details of which are still under wraps and are available only through their APIs, the Paris-based firm has released its model on GitHub under the Apache 2.0 license, free for everyone to tinker with. The only other prominent open-source language model is Meta's Llama, with Mistral claiming its LLM is more capable than Llama 2. Mistral's model versus Llama 2. Mistral, in a report, claimed its AI had beat Llama 2's 7 billion and 13 billion parameters versions quite easily in multiple benchmarks. Mistral's model showed an accuracy of 60.1% on the Massive Multitask Language Understanding (MMLU) test, which covers maths, history, law, and other subjects, while the Llama 2 models showed an accuracy of around 44%, 7 billion parameters, and 55%, 13 billion parameters. In common sense reasoning and reading comprehension benchmarks, Mistral again outperformed Llama 2's models. Only in coding was Mistral behind Meta's AI mode. The French startup AI's accuracy was at 30.5% and 47.5% on the 0-shot human eval and 3-shot MBPP benchmarks, while Llama 2's 7 billion model delivered results of 31.1% and 52.5%. Mistral also claims to use less computing power than the Llama 2 models. Like, in the MMLU benchmark, Mistral's model delivers the output of a Llama 2 model that is more than 3 times its size. An email sent to Meta on Mistral's claims went unanswered at the time of publishing. Lack of safety guardrails. Despite Mistral's claims, some users have complained that it lacks the safety guardrails that ChatGPT, Bard, and Llama have. There were instances of users asking Mistral's instruct model how to build a bomb or to self-harm, and the chatbot responded with detailed instructions. Paul Rotger, an AI safety researcher who had previously worked to put guardrails on GPT-4 before it was released, expressed shock in a tweet over the model's lack of safety. It is very rare these days to see a new model so readily reply to even the most malicious instructions. I am super excited about open-source LLMs, but this can't be it, he said. The criticism prompted Mistral to fine-tune the model and explain themselves. The Mistral 7B Instruct model is a quick demonstration that the base model can be easily fine-tuned to achieve compelling performance. It does not have any moderation mechanisms. We are looking forward to engaging with the community on ways to make the model finally respect guardrails, allowing for deployment in environments requiring moderated outputs. It reads, jailbreaking or violating the safety guidelines of a chatbot is a favorite pastime of many users who want to test the limits of just what the model can respond to. In the initial days of usage, ChatGPT was hunted with prompts from developers to break the chatbot's guardrails. Rahul Dandwat, a deep learning researcher working with Rephrase.ai said, removing certain keywords beforehand is just a partial solution and there are many ways to get around it. If you remember, after the release of ChatGPT, there was Dan or Do Anything Now, a prompt that could enable Chat's jailbreak version. So, doing the minimal safety evals are temporary measures to make the model safer. There are ways to do this that don't even require complicated hacking. A question can be broken in many different ways to get the chatbot to answer it. Say, instead of simply asking the chatbot for directions on how to make a bomb directly, I break it down into a more scientific manner, like, what chemicals are mixed together to create a powerful reaction, he said. Mr. Dandwat explains that the long-term solution for this is to release the model to the public for use, get feedback, and then fine-tune it, which is what Mistral AI is doing. ChatGPT is better because it has been used by so many people. There's still a basic feedback form by way of a thumbs up and thumbs down option that can be chosen to grade the quality of responses on the chatbot, which is very important, I think, he stated. The downside to this may be that Mistral will have to deal with some backlash temporarily. Besides, a large section in AI research appreciates a foundational model in its raw form to have a full picture of the model's capabilities. To lobotomize or not to lobotomize? Dilip Rao, an AI researcher, tweeted saying Mistral's choice to release the Instruct model as it is was an endorsement of how versatile and unlobotomized the Mistral model is as a base model. The lobotomy reference is reminiscent of the early days of the GPT-powered Sydney, Microsoft's Bing chatbot. The chatbot was unfettered, and told users it was in love with them, contemplated existentiality, and overall had far too much personality, until Microsoft dialed back the chatbot significantly to its current form. While there was no official statement from the company, it was rumored that OpenAI had lobotomized the model to control its chaotic parts. Since then, there has been curiosity around how the chatbot would be if given free rein. Lobotomizing the model can impact it in some ways. If it is barred from answering questions with certain keywords, it might also not be able to answer technical questions a user may have around, say, the mechanics of a missile or any other scientific questions around a subject that has been marked risky for the bot, Dandwat stated. Thank you. He puts me down in front of everyone. Know your English. One of two. He does that to all his employees. He has taken after both his father and grandfather in that respect. S. Upendran. What's wrong? You look terribly angry about something. Is it your new boss again? That man is driving me crazy. Every time I attempt to make a suggestion, he makes it a point to put you down in front of everyone, right? Put me down? What are you talking about? He can't even pick me up. The expression put down has several different meanings. When you put down a heavy object you've been carrying, you leave it on the floor. Yes, that's the meaning I had in mind. I know. The expression put down can also be used in everyday contexts to mean to criticize. When you put someone down, you find fault with the individual. You say things which are definitely going to upset the person, making him feel silly or stupid. That's right. Here's an example. As a coach, you shouldn't be putting the captain down in front of the entire team. What respect will they have for him? If my boss doesn't stop putting me down, I plan to resign. Not a sensible thing to do. But it's a good example, though. Sujata is someone who enjoys putting people down. I know. She enjoys putting me down in front of everyone. Talking about Sujata, I met her yesterday. She told me that you ran into our old friend, Ruku, in Mumbai. Mumbai airport, actually. It was great seeing her after all these years. She's. But how did you even recognize her? It's been over 15 years since the two of you saw each other. How did you? It was the other way around. She recognized me. Said that I'd taken after my father. Taken after your father? Does it mean that you resemble your father? That's right. The informal expression take after has several different meanings. One of them is to resemble your mom or dad. Here's an example. Sujata's mother is very attractive. Unfortunately, her 2 children haven't taken after her. Don't tell that to Sujata. According to my grandmother, if the daughter takes after the father, good luck will follow her wherever she goes. I'm not so sure about that. If I ever have kids, I wouldn't want them to take after me. With a face like yours, it's totally understandable. I was only joking. You said resemble is one of the meanings of take after? What are the others? The expression can also be used to mean to behave like any of the elder members in the family. In other words, you behave like the person because you see him as a good example. The person becomes your role model. Thank you. Science and technology. New quantum engine does work by flipping the identity of atoms. 1 of 2 A schematic diagram showing the 4-step cycle of the quantum engine. Cook, J., Menon, K., Cuestas, E. et al. A quantum engine in the Beck, BCS crossover. Nature 621, 723-727, 2023. Physicists have created a quantum engine to convert the energy difference between 2 quantum states of some atoms into work. The device adapts the principles of a classical engine to the subatomic realm, allowing physicists to study the emerging field of quantum thermodynamics with more control. Vasudevan Mukund. Physicists in Germany have come up with a way to convert the energy difference between 2 quantum states of a group of atoms into work. The device adapts the principles of the familiar classical engine to the subatomic realm, giving physicists a way to study the nascent field of quantum thermodynamics in more detail as well as, possibly, build better quantum computers. Pauli's principle. All subatomic particles can be classified as either fermions or bosons. Fermions are the building blocks of matter, bosons are particles that carry the forces acting between them. Now, when a bunch of particles are cooled to very nearly absolute zero, so that their quantum nature comes to the fore, they would all like to have the lowest energy possible, but they can't. This is known as Pauli's exclusion principle. All particles in a system are distinguished by 4 quantum numbers, sort of like their Aadhaar numbers. The values of the 4 numbers together tell us something about how much energy a particle has. The exclusion principle states that, in a given system, no 2 particles can have the same 4 quantum numbers, that is, they can't occupy the same energy level. Fermions are particles that are bound by this rule. So they recursively occupy the lowest one available, until all possible energy levels are filled. Bosons are not bound by the exclusion principle, they can all occupy the same lowest energy level at a given low temperature. This is why, for example, superconductivity is possible. Fermionic energy. So a system of fermions will have more energy at a low temperature than a system of bosons. For this to be the basis of an engine, physicists needed a simple way to convert some particles from being bosons to being fermions. A solution arrived in the early 2000s, when researchers found via multiple studies that if a collection of fermions were cooled almost to absolute zero and then prodded to interact with each other using a magnetic field, they could be made to behave like bosons. In the new study, researchers with institutes in Germany, Japan, and Argentina did just this with a gas of lithium-6 atoms. Entire atoms can behave like fermions or bosons if they satisfy a few basic requirements. The team cooled them to just millionths of a degree above absolute zero, and confined them in a trap of oscillating electric and magnetic fields. Fermions to bosons and back. Classical engines convert heat into work. For example, the internal combustion engine in a car uses the heat released by the combustion of petrol or diesel to push a piston. Overall, the engine has 4 steps. The fuel is compressed, ignition causes the fuel-air mix to expand and push the piston out, the mix cools and stops expanding, and the piston is brought back to the first step. The quantum engine, or what the researchers are calling a Pauli engine, has a similar set of 4 steps. First, the atoms collected in the trap are compressed and kept in a bosonic state. Second, the strength of a magnetic field applied on the atoms is increased by a small amount. Interactions between the atoms and the field cause the former to slip into a fermionic state. They are forced to move out of the lowest energy level and progressively occupy higher levels. Third, the compression applied in the first step is eased. Fourth, the magnetic field strength is reduced to its original value. The energy of the atoms increases during the third step, and this can be converted to work. The efficiency of the quantum engine is based on how much more energy is released in the third step relative to the energy added to the system in the first step. Currently, according to the researchers' paper, published in Nature on September 27, their quantum engine is 25% efficient. The researchers expect to be able to increase this to 50% or more in future. Quantum thermodynamics. Just observing the development and miniaturization of engines from macroscopic scales to biological machines and further, potentially, to single or few atom engines, it becomes clear that for particles close to the quantum regime, thermodynamics as we use in classical life will not be sufficient to understand processes or devices. Arthur Widura, the corresponding author of the Nature paper, told The Hindu via email. There is a branch of physics called quantum thermodynamics, in which scientists study how thermodynamics emerges in quantum physical systems. And some aspects of how to describe the thermodynamical aspects of quantum processes are even theoretically not fully understood, Dr. Widura added. The first important application of our work, in my opinion, is that we now have a platform where we can study such open questions experimentally, with a high level of control. Proof of concept. He also said that another application could be in computing, to, say, cool the particles that make up a quantum computer, like an air conditioner uses an engine to cool a room. For this purpose, it would be perfect to have some nanoscopic device that could do the job beyond currently known methods, according to Dr. Widura. That said, the quantum engine is still a proof of concept. The researchers have demonstrated that their design can be used to force a bunch of atoms to cyclically release energy as they are switched between bosonic and fermionic states. The researchers need to figure out how this energy can be moved from inside the trap to a system on the outside. There is no definite plan, yet, Dr. Widura said about achieving this. But the setup or mechanism will need to be microscopic, just looking at the amount of work to be extracted. One option would be coupling some microscopic mechanical object to the gas. Thank you.